How can we learn to hear from God? Question number 3. So I would say this. Let me give you a few thoughts. Number 1, everybody can hear from God. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice." John 10. Yeah, everybody can hear the voice of God. The challenge is not to get God to talk. The challenge is to get his people to listen. And I think in some way the real danger is we've so lost the plot with this concept of hearing from God that I think what we should do is we should take baby Christians from day one and say, you can hear from God. Begin to learn to hear from God. Begin to practice. I don't mean try to hear and tell other people what to do and go and prophesy over the president, but I mean learn, keep asking God questions, keep listening. And at times what I think the church has done is we've gone to younger believers and we've said, it's dangerous to hear from God. You could make mistakes. Rather, you come and rely on me, Mr. Pastor. And I'm a pastor, so I understand that desire to keep people safe. But we actually keep people safe when we say, lean not on your own understanding and let the Lord direct your path. Learn to lean on him. So number 1, I'd say this, everybody can hear from God. Number 2, in the Old Testament, there were certain people, the prophets, if you will, that would hear from God. A New Testament prophet would hear from God for the people. An Old Testament prophet would hear from God for the people. A New Testament prophet, the primary role of a New Testament prophet is not to hear from God for you. The primary role of a New Testament prophet is to help you develop your spiritual relationship so you can hear from God. It's really important, that one is. So how do we practice this? How do we improve this? I've got some teaching, lots of teaching on this online, but I'll give you a few quick thoughts today. Number 1, start with humility. You're going to get this wrong. Everybody I know who does this gets it wrong at some stage. I have done, will do again probably. And having that walk of humility that says, I can hear from God. God does speak to me, but I'm still a learner. In the UK, we put L plates, literally a large a white sticker with a large letter L on learner drivers for the first year, or when they're driving anyway, is to let everybody else around them know this is a learner. They might make a few mistakes. You might want to give them a bit more space or a bit more grace as they learn. And I think we should all have L plates on us as we hear from God. Yeah, never take your L plate off. Yeah, if you take your L plate off, I'll put a P plate on you, and PRIDE plate. So stay in that place of humility that says we're learning, we can hear from God, but we can make mistakes. And God has given us scriptural backups and fail-safes to stop us making some of the silly mistakes we can make. But start in that place of humility. Secondly, just keep practicing. I would encourage you to get a journal every day. And I know some people, I've heard some teaching about you close your mind and write that's just weird. What I mean is get a good cup of coffee, a Bible, a journal, and pray and say, Lord, what's going to happen to me today? Lord, what do you want me to know about this day? And learn to practice hearing and learn to differentiate. And the more you practice, the more you'll learn to differentiate between your thoughts and his thoughts. It's actually not that hard. Let me give you an analogy. For most Christians, and especially younger Christians, though some never mature in this realm, the voice of God convicting us of sin looks very like the voice of Satan condemning us for sin. Now, why? Because when we're in sin, we're usually all defensive and that, but after a while, you can learn to notice differences in the voice of conviction that comes from above and the voice of condemnation that comes from below. Yeah, and in the same way, I think the more we practice and the more we seek God, the more we can learn to separate soul and spirit, joints and marrow. We can separate what is just my own desires, my own heart, my own imagination, if you will, and what's really coming from God. And then when Satan jumps in, we notice it straight away. So practice, practice, practice. What I would say, key number 3 as well, is develop a track record, which is why I say get a journal, try to hear from God every day, and then go back and notice, was it God or wasn't it? Rather than try to use your amazing prophetic God-hearing abilities to tell other people what to do, Start with yourself, build up a track record with yourself, then build a track record with other people, and then God will allow you to do that in ministry. You know, as a leader in the body of Christ, one of the most miserable things is I constantly get people trying to give me words, telling me what to do, that will cost me time, money, focus, whatever, and they've never earned any credibility. They've never built that track record with me, and I'm really open to that with them. So I would say this: build that personal history, learn to develop, you know, day after day, week after week, year after year, what is God, what isn't God, and it's not that hard if you consistently do that. So practice, practice, practice. And two more quick keys as well. I could talk on this one for hours, but having faith is God speaks to faith. So when you believe God's speaking to you, God will speak to you. And when you're in doubt and you believe he doesn't speak to you, he won't speak to you. So having faith is just a real, you know, get into that place of faith. Say, Lord, I believe you speak to me. I believe I can hear your voice. I believe I'm guided. I believe you give me specific things I couldn't possibly know that will open the hearts of men and women. Lord, I believe you're ordering my steps. Engage your faith. And lastly, everything's all about relationship. So we don't want to look at hearing from God in terms of, here am I alone on the earth and I'm trying to like get this message from above, like this UFO signal I'm trying to decipher. Rather, when we think we've heard, what we should do is press into relationship. And when we think we've heard from God, move back into relationship, move into the Holy of Holies, move into worship. If I think I've heard from God and it's really me, but I really seek God and I'm more of him and I'm close with him, I'm spending more time in worship than I'm trying to evaluate this word. The things that come from God grow in God's presence. The things that don't come from God shrink in his presence. So again, press into relationship rather than technique. Boom. It's really useful. Good. Question number 4.